It is not as hard as you think to be a huge, impactful, highly effective teacher. It's really not that hard. A lot of people think it is, and I'm gonna show you tonight how it's really not. Some people think that in order to be a highly effective teacher, that there's things that you have to learn and know, and that you got to emulate some other people. You got to learn what some other highly effective teachers are doing. And the reality is, the things that you need to know are already inside of you. And I'm not trying to sound like a Disney movie, right? But the things that you need to know are already inside of you. And what I mean by that is the process of inversion thinking. The process of inversion thinking states that our brains are more equipped at finding problems that they are at finding solutions. So, what that means is we're able to think through the problems more easily than we are to find a solution. So, if I ask you, what does it take to be a highly effective teacher? It's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to cause a little bit of pause before you can just get ahead and ramble off an answer. But if I were to ask you what it takes to be a terrible teacher, I'm sure it's easier to think, right, of some solutions. We're going to go through an example just so I can really break it down for you. The process of inversion thinking. It was made popular by Charlie Munger, and it's super, super interesting because it really helps us think about what it takes to be highly effective. So let's figure that out, right? I'm going to give an example of relationships. If I were to tell you or ask you what it takes to be highly effective or to last in your relationship forever. If I were to ask you what it takes to be in your relationship forever, coming up with those examples might be a little bit tricky. But if I were to ask you, what does it take in order for you to end your relationship immediately? I'm sure you can give me some answers, right? And that's exactly the same thing. I'm sure if you think about what it takes in order to end a relationship, you may say things like infidelity, right? You may say things like, man, if they're abusive to my kids, right? Or if they spend all our money doing silly things, right? Or if I don't know, like they're abusive, or if they don't communicate, they just do things that I don't like. Like those types of things would be like, I can't be in this relationship anymore. So the process of inversion thinking says, lay all these things out and then find the solution to those problems that you already laid out. And that's how you get the desired result. It's easier to think about the result that you don't desire. So lay those things out and then figure out how to get the result you desire. So if you know that by having infidelity in the relationship, that is going to end the relationship, hmm, that means if I want to keep the relationship going, I should be faithful. Like that's how that goes, right? Is that making sense? Let me know in the comment section. Let me know if that's making sense. Inversion thinking means I'm going to think about the things that it takes for me to not have what I want, and I'm going to think about the opposite of those things so I can get exactly what it is that I want, right? So, with that being said, I want to use the process of inversion thinking for us as educators to figure out what it takes to be highly effective, what it takes to be a highly effective educator. Now, what I want to do is I want you guys to let me know in the comment section what are some things it takes to be terrible. Because if you can tell me what it takes to be terrible, I can flip that and show you what it takes to be great. That's the process of inversion thinking. So I've got a couple minutes here tonight. Let's rock and roll. I have some queued up just in case we don't feel like sharing in the comments, but this is a place where you can share so that we can communicate. What are some things that it takes to be a terrible teacher? Well, let me give you some insights as somebody who once was a terrible teacher, as somebody who was doing a detriment to students, did not know how to manage the classroom, as somebody who was afraid to communicate to parents, right? As somebody who honestly was just not doing the best that I could and not really making a big impact on students. Somebody that struggled for a long time trying to figure this thing out. I'm that person, and I want to help you to avoid the problems that I've been through. One of the things that I was doing that was making me a terrible teacher was I was allowing students to do things their way. And what I mean by that is I was allowing students to show up however they wanted with no expectations. Like I remember I remember early on, I would tell students that they could just come in class, you know, they had some time to just go ahead and talk. They didn't have to get started with a do now right away. They didn't have to get started with the warm up right away. If they needed to go to the bathroom, they could just get up and do it. I was like, you guys are 12 years old. I trust you. Why? Why? I don't know. But they went ahead and they abused that system. Why? So they would come in late. They wouldn't take any books out or their laptops out. They would, when it's time to go to the bathroom, they would just go and be gone for mad long. You know what I'm saying? What's going on, Bobby? And I'm trying to figure out like why was that such a terrible option? And the reason why it was such a terrible option is because I had no standards, no rules, no expectations. A lot of times when we allow students to make the decision, they end up deciding something that we wouldn't want them to do, right? So what made me terrible in that moment was that I allowed students to run all over the classroom. I didn't provide a structure for them to thrive. So, what would make me a highly effective teacher would be to do the exact opposite. Remember, we're talking about inversion thinking. If you're just joining us, inversion thinking is the process of understanding that our brain is more equipped at finding problems than it is at finding solutions. So, we're listing out the problems, what it takes to be a terrible teacher. Let me know in the comments what it takes to be a terrible teacher. And we're going to flip those things around, do the opposite so that we get the desired result. So, I was a terrible teacher because I let the students run that classroom. What would have made it more effective is if I had expectations and supported students to meet those expectations. So that's one of the things that it's going to take for us to be an effective teacher. It's funny because I used to think that by providing structure, I was actually limiting my students' freedom. And that's not the case. Structure actually produces freedom. Let me show you why. Almost this time last year, about 11 months ago, then it was Mother's Day. We were getting a gift for my wife, and I went to the store. I had already gotten her big gift, but my daughter said she just wanted to get her some balloons. So we went to a local grocery store. Harris Teeter is what it's called here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my daughter picked out this balloon. It was, yeah, I've never seen a balloon so big in my life. It was huge. It was pink. I think it was like a flamingo or something. It was big. And she was like, "Can we get this one?" And I looked over at it and it was 21.99. And I was like, "Ooh, I wasn't trying to buy a $22 balloon, right?" So I was like, "You know what? Maybe mommy wants something else." Trying to persuade my daughter to go a different direction. But then I looked around the store and I noticed there was this aisle where the balloons looked pretty smaller. Lots of balloons, but they were small. So I went over and I looked at one of them. They were $4.99. So I said, "Hey, baby, what about you get mom a balloon from this aisle? Watch this. What if you get her a balloon from this aisle?" So she looked up and down the aisle and she found another one, a pink one. It was smaller, but a pink one still. And she said, "Oh, I love this." And she said, "Can we get this one for mommy?" She handed it to me. It was $4.99. And I was like, "Absolutely. I think she'll love it." Now, the reason why I told that is not because I wanted to show you I was cheap. I told you already, I already got her a big gift. Don't judge me in the place tonight. I told you I already got her a big gift. I was just trying to add a little something on top. But I wasn't sharing that to you to show you that I'm frugal or that I'm cheap. I was sharing that because I wanted you to see how structure provided freedom. When she had free reign around the whole entire store, she would then choose something that I wasn't willing to purchase. She could choose a balloon that was outside of our budget. She could do something that would not lead to the desired outcome. But once I provided a structure, once I said, "Baby girl, stay in this aisle," providing that structure, just stay in this, you can pick any balloon you want, just in this aisle. That's when she was able to have freedom to choose whatever balloon she wanted. Is that making sense? Let me know if that's making sense. What I'm trying to say is, when I was a terrible teacher, I thought that if I provided too much structure, I'll be limiting my students' success. When in actuality, the opposite is true. By providing structure, by providing parameters, by giving standards and expectations and holding them to those expectations, then we actually unlock freedom. They can be themselves within the confines of the expectations that we set. So what made me a terrible teacher was that I didn't have those expectations. I didn't have those standards, and I let them have free reign, and they ended up not achieving the desired result. But we're going to flip that using inversion thinking and say, if terrible teachers allow free reign and students can do whatever, that means highly effective teachers have standards and expectations. So I want you to be teachers that have standards and expectations. That's how inversion thinking works. Give me one more in the comment section down below. Give me one more. What does it take, or what is something that terrible teachers do? All right. Bobby said he starts the year with his students by saying, "Tell me what a terrible teacher does." And then he flips it. That's literally inversion. That's the process of inversion thinking. That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Think about the things that it takes to be terrible. Again, if you're just joining us, inversion thinking means that our brains are more equipped to finding things that are problems rather than finding solutions. So if you are a person that is trying to figure out how to be an effective teacher, and you're thinking, I have to go see somebody else's classroom, I got to go visit the Ron Clark Academy, I got to go study these books. I'm not saying those are bad ideas. I'm saying don't overlook the thoughts you already have on the inside of you. Again, not to sound cliche, but all that you have is all that you need. You are enough. You already have enough. I promise. If you sit down and think, what does it take to be terrible? You can come up with an extensive list of what terrible teachers do. Terrible teachers fight students. Terrible teachers don't respect students. Terrible teachers don't build relationships. Terrible teachers curse out students. Like, what does it take to be terrible? I'm sure you can come up with an extensive list of things that can get terrible. To make it even plainer, what is the list of things that can get you fired? Like, I'm sure man, posting my students and their grades and their personal data on social media. Okay, if that's something that could get you fired, or if that's something that a terrible teacher would do, let's flip it. That means transformative teachers don't post their students on social media with their personal information and data. It's as simple as that, right? What are the things that it takes for you to be terrible? Easy to find those. Then flip those things on its head. Another thing I used to do when I was a terrible teacher is that I used to just go based off of feelings rather than facts. I'm talking about data. I would go based off feelings rather than facts. I felt like that was a good lesson. I felt like I delivered that thing, right? I felt like I was teaching tonight, like I mean, today in the classroom. I felt like I planned the lesson well, that I delivered the lesson well, but I wasn't assessing students to see if they were actually getting and retaining the information that I was sharing. So since I wasn't doing that, I had absolutely no idea if students were actually learning. Just because you taught it doesn't mean they learned it. I'm gonna say that one more time because somebody needed to hear it. Just because you taught it doesn't mean they learned it. How do you know? I would teach them like, man, I did good on that thing. They should get this. And when they would end up taking a quarterly exam or a benchmark or a test or something, they would not do well. And I was like, I taught that. Just because you taught it doesn't mean they learned it. So what a terrible teacher does, a terrible teacher operates off of feelings instead of facts. And they feel that because I delivered this lesson well to my standard, or felt good coming out of my mouth, that students are going to retain this information. And that's not necessarily the case, which means if we're using the process of inversion thinking, we'll take that, flip it on its head, and we'll say, instead of thinking, let me operate off of feelings instead of facts, how about we operate off of facts instead of feelings? What does the data say? Are we assessing students regularly, not over assessing students through checks for understanding, through turning talks? Are we doing some sort of quick assessments to make sure that students are getting the information before we determine that they got it or they didn't? Right? So operating from facts. I know that 67% of students mastered this learning objective. How do I know? Because I assessed them. I did a lesson check. I did an exit ticket. I did a warm up. Whatever it is that you assess them, I know that I can comfortably move on to the next thing because 67% of my students are showing that they mastered this content. So I'm going to take the other 23% and we're going to work in a small group. 33%. Right? So operating from facts instead of feelings. So these are some of the ways. I just wanted to show you the actual strategy of how to use inversion thinking. I'm sure that now you can take this and you can actually apply it to your situation. Think through some of the things that make teachers terrible. Flip it on its head and go be great. Right? These are some of the things that we're teaching in the summit this weekend. I'm sure you've heard about it, but if you didn't hear about it, a couple of my colleagues and friends and brothers and sisters in this work are going to have a summit this Sunday, April the 21st. It is going to be amazing. I've just been talking to them, and we are really trying to help teachers last from now to the end of the year. Give you the tools, tips, and strategies, learning how to take proven principles, match them with your special skills so that you can make an immense impact. I told you before, we signed up for the full 180. Some of us at my school, we have 28 days left. I know some of you have less, some of you have a little bit more, but the fact of the matter is, that's 28 days of impact. You can still make the impact that you were called to make before this year is over. And on this Sunday, April 21st, we'll show you how. The link is in the description below. Hope to see you there. My daughter said, Daddy, will you be finished with your live in time for worship? And I said, I will. So we're doing worship in 12 minutes. I'm going to sign off now and go ahead and check in with her and with my son on that. And in that note, I want to remind you, use the process of inversion thinking. Find what does it take to be terrible? Flip it and go be great. All right. I'll see you.